Blessed is the man who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. But the man who delights in the law of the Lord and meditates on his law day and night, he is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers.
Hello and welcome to the Word for Today. We are a Bible study of the New Hope Missionary Baptist Church. And wow, we are so glad to have you with us. And we want to welcome you to our broadcast and just let you know that it's good to have you back, good to be back. And we are coming to you live. I like to call it an hour of power, where we get to look at the Word of God, and we are right smack dab in the middle of looking at one of the great books of all the Bible, the book of beginnings. That would be the book of Genesis. And so we've been taking a deeper look into the life of one of the great patriarchs in the Old Testament, and that would be right now we're looking at the life of Abraham. So welcome aboard. We say welcome to all of you who joining us by way of Facebook and YouTube. And as we would say in the real world, without any further ado, we're going to get started. Our topic for today is really coming from one of the verses in this passage in chapter 18 of Genesis, where the question is asked, is anything too hard for the Lord? And that's a great question, and we're going to jump right into it. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to start off by we're talking about Abraham's hospitality and the Lord's promise. And here's our opening question. And feel free to give us your comments on Facebook or YouTube. Just put them in the comment field. So, when did you laugh the hardest last week? Okay. When did you really laugh? I mean, one of those one of those laughs. You ever laugh so hard that you almost want to cry? When did you laugh the hardest last week? Okay, when did you laugh the hardest last week? And the older I'm getting, I'm learning that sometimes if I really want to laugh hard, I can just look at some of the silly stuff I do. And you kind of look back and you say, hey, did I do that? So when did you laugh the hardest last week? Okay, what happened? If you don't mind me asking, would like to know, when did you laugh the hardest on last week? Okay, all right. So while you're formulating your responses, we're going to talk about why this is important, because, especially for Christians, I want to be honest with you. I grew up in a tradition in a church where laughter was not something that was particularly smiled upon. Okay. Most of the people I went to church with, I think they were decent people. They were good people, but they didn't laugh a lot. Okay. For some reason, it kind of felt like if you were a Christian and you laughed, that maybe something was wrong with your religion. Maybe something was wrong with your relationship with God. Now, when I came in ministry and I started preaching and teaching, and I like to keep it on the light side. I enjoy levity. I enjoy laughing at myself. I've had people actually say that they never thought you could laugh in church, that somehow there was something wrong with that. But as this particular text will tell us, uh, sometimes laughter can be the best medicine. Okay. So, when did you laugh the hardest last week? Elizabeth Jackson said, oh, last week, many times. Okay. Uh, you know, so you'll find out in this text that laughter is going to be one of those big things that shows up and pops up in this particular pericope. Okay. So let's continue the thought. Okay. Uh, what do you think is the ideal age to have children? Okay. All right. You may be past your childbearing years. That's not. I'm not asking if you're gonna have them later in life. But what do you think is a good age to have children? What do you think is a good age to have children? Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you this. What if I told you, true story, that there's a couple that we know, the guy is 100 and the woman is 90, and both of them are going together. They're gonna have a child. For him, it's gonna be his second child. Okay. Now, incidentally, if I told you he had his first child when he was like 86, okay, and he has his second child when he's 100. She has her first child when she's 90. Okay. So, what do you think is the ideal age to have children? So, Elizabeth Jackson said between 25 and 30. Ken Carter, good to see you. He says between the age of 27 to 34. Okay. I don't see nobody saying nothing about 60 and 70. Okay. But interesting that in God's timing, He determines that the proper age for this couple is 100 and the other is 90. Okay. Not kind of the age that you figure to be having your first child. Maybe it's the kind of age where you're having your grandchild or great grandchildren or great great grandchildren, but not necessarily your first newborn. Okay. But this is what really we're going to be talking about in this particular story. Okay. So let's look at something. Okay. So we're going to be looking at Genesis stories from the beginning. So let's get into it. Okay. Uh, so we're going to read Genesis chapter 18, verses 1 to 15, and we're reading from the NIV, the New International Version of the Bible. Okay. Let me see. I got to pull it up here. Okay. Now, this passage is one of those passages. We're only going to read the one part of Genesis 18 because it's about a promise, but it's also deeper than a promise. And we're going to find that out when we get to the next episode. Okay. There's some stuff going around in the background, but we're going to see this. Okay. So let's look at this. Okay. Let me make it bigger for those of you at home. Now, let me see. Okay. I'm still here. Okay. So Genesis chapter 18. Let me see. And we're going to begin at verse number 1. Now, what I want you to pay attention to when we read this particular story is what's happening in the background. Okay, because there's something happening. The Lord appeared to Abram near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abram looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Okay. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may wash all your feet and rest under this tree." Okay. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way. Now that you have come to your servant. Oh, hold on a minute. Okay. Very well, they answered. Do as you say. So Abram hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. Where is your wife, Sarah? They asked him. There in the tent, he said. Then one of them said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now, Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abram and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abram, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. This is the word of the Lord. Okay, so there you got it. That's the first part, that first pericope of Genesis chapter 18. And we're going to delve into it, and we're going to be asking a lot of questions. So we're hoping and praying that you will get into it and respond by, putting your answers in the comment field. So the big idea of this text is simple. We can trust God no matter how impossible the situation, because God always keeps his promises. Now, we're in chapter 18, and God originally appears to Abram in chapter 12 and tells him about this promise, how he's going to make him great, how he's going to make his descendants numerous, and all of this. He comes back again in chapter 15 reiterates the promise, does the same thing again in chapter 16, 17. So every time you turn around, God is reiterating his promise. Last episode we were in, God really reinforces his promise by giving Abram a covenant and saying, Abram, I know everything I told you before I'm going to do. But now he says to Abram, I want you to do something. And he asked Abram to institute the rite of circumcision. That's cutting away a part of the male's sexual organ, the foreskin. Okay, as a kind of symbol of the kind of relationship that God was getting in with Abram. So God promises Abram, and when God initially promised Abram, Abram comes back to God and says, God, I'm great. I'm glad you're going to make me great. I'm glad you're going to bless me. I'm glad you're going to do this, but I don't have an heir. I don't have anybody in my house to, uh, to receive or to inherit what you're going to give me. He said, all I have is Eliezer of Damascus. He's not my kinfolk, but he's the only male I got. And God told him, no, you're going to have a child. So he and his wife come up with this plan. His wife's plan basically is that, look, Abe, I know I'm too old. I can't have a child, but this young thing we got from Egypt, Hagar, you sleep with her. She belongs to me. She'll become like a secondary wife, and she can produce an heir, and that'll be my child. Okay. Abraham doesn't protest. He lays down with Hagar. She gets pregnant. She has a son. His name is Ishmael. There's tension between Sarah when she's pregnant to the fact that Hagar wants to run away. She runs away and basically out there trying to get back to Egypt, and probably would have died in the desert. But the Lord told her to go back, be subject to Sarah. She has the baby, and then literally all hell does break loose. It gets really bad, really gets bad. Okay, but God comes back to Abram and says, Abram, I told you I'm going to give you a son. And now what he does in chapter 17, he says, Abram, my intention all along was not to just give you a son, but to give you and Sarah a child between the two of you. And that child would be the child of the promise. Now, I'm going to make Ishmael great. I'm going to make him, ruler over 12 nations and all this. I'm going to give him, he's going to be prosperous. But, eventually you're going to have your own child. And Abram is reminded of this. And then we get to chapter 8, where 3 strangers show up at his door. Okay, so that's where we are. Okay, now let me make this map bigger for you. This is where the red dot is called a place called Hebron. It's south of Jerusalem, and this place is where the great trees of Mamre are. Okay, and so this is where Abram is actually at this time. Now here is the question for us. When we read the story about Abram and these visitors, the question is, I want you to think about it. Give me your best answer. When do you think Abraham realized that it was the Lord visiting him? Okay. When do you think Abram realized that it was actually the Lord visiting him? Okay. What do you think? Okay. I want you to think about that a minute, because the whole of this experience really revolves around the fact that God now decides that he's going to show up himself and reiterate this promise that he made with Abram. Okay, so when does Abram really figure it out? What do you think? Okay, I'll give you a moment to think about it. Okay, when does Abram figure out that it was the Lord visiting him? Okay. Now, why is this important? Well, uh, Elizabeth Jackson said when he was told that he was going to have a son. Okay. All right. Well, let's just go back a little bit into this story. Okay. Let's see if we can go back to it. Okay. And see what we can figure out. Okay. Now, remember, uh, he's near he and Sarah. They're near the place called Mamre, the great trees. Now he's sitting at the entrance to his tent. It's the heat of the day. Okay. Uh, Ken Carter says is when he sees them approaching. Now Abram looked up and saw three men standing nearby. Now notice what Abram does. He sees three guys approaching him. He hurriedly gets up from an entrance to meet him. And get this, he bows down low to the ground. Okay. Now, to understand what's going on with Abram, you got to understand the culture that Abraham lived in. In the East, it was customary, it was downright expected that whenever a stranger entered into a place, that he would be received and welcomed by whoever was the head of the house. That was just Eastern hospitality. It wasn't like hospitality in the West. But in the East, if you showed up at somebody's house, the head of the house had an obligation to take you under their roof, to offer you something to eat, and basically show kindness. Now, the payoff was that in that culture, that what one got for opening their house, their hospitality, extending food, is that usually the guest of honor, whoever that was, would bless that man of the house. He would bless that house. He would leave something, as a blessing, as a benediction, or as a promise from God with that owner. Okay. So what we see Abram doing is he sees three men. Okay, he doesn't know them, hasn't spoken to them, but he gets in a hurry and he goes to meet them. As a sign of respect, he bows down low. Okay. Now, J.M. Carter said when he saw them appear. Okay. So we're not 100% certain, but get this. Abram says, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. So Abram invites him into his house and said, look, if you find me to be hospitable, don't leave me and go to somebody else. Okay. Let me get you a little bit of water so you can wash your feet and you can rest under this tree. That's the kind of hospitality that people in the East showed. Okay. You didn't have to be family. You didn't have to get a telegram or a text message that they were coming. The fact that they merely showed up meant that you were obligated to show them some form of hospitality. And that's exactly what Abram does. Now, let me see. He said, let me get you something to eat so that you can be refreshed and then go on your way. And so they say, okay. And what Abram does is he goes into the tent, tells Sarah, quick, get the best flour, and I want you to bake your pastries, bake whatever the bread, whatever you bake something real nice for these three fellas. Okay. He goes and gets a calf. Okay. And runs to his servant, tells servant to get the cattle and kill it and cook it, so we can feed these guests. Okay. So let me ask you this question then for us. Let me see if I can put it up here like this. How do you feel when you find strangers knocking on your door? How do you respond in this situation? Okay. So somebody comes up, knocks on your door. What do you do? Do you go in and look through the side window to see who it is? Do you open the door and say, come on in? I have a device on my door, which is called a ring. Okay. And basically, it is a motion detector. Somebody comes close to the door, it will alert me and say, hey, somebody's at the front door. Okay. I also can go on my device and look at the front door and see who it is. So I can know who it is before I go open the door. Okay. Now, somebody shows up at your door and you weren't expecting them, right? Are you at least curious, as Elizabeth Jackson said, about what they want? Do you do what Abram does? Do you go in and run them down, say, come on in, come on in. Let me cook something real quick. Let me go get some food. Let me go wash your feet. Let me go take care of whatever needs you have. That's probably not the way you and I do it. Okay. But that's how Abraham did it. Okay. Now, not only that, let me show you this. Now, let me ask you this question. What level of hospitality do you show to guests? Okay. Now, somebody shows up unannounced. They didn't call you. They didn't say they were coming. I mean, do you pull out all the stops? Do you get the finest linen? Do you say, hey, here, what do you want to eat? You know, maybe, I'll order something. Okay. And the question is, how do you decide what degree of welcome to give to a particular guest? All right. Deacon Anderson says, nope, not getting in, especially if I don't know you. Okay. So what we see with Abram in our culture, we would say, Abram, ain't nowhere in the world I'm letting these people under my tent, taking out my finest china, taking out the best flour, cooking up a meal, killing one of my animals so that they could eat. Then washing their feet and just having these folk luxuriate, and I don't even know who they are. But that is the culture that Abraham was living in. Okay? All right? So let's see this. Okay. Now, what does hospitality mean to you? What does hospitality mean to you? Okay. How do you demonstrate hospitality beyond simply welcoming people into your home? I mean, are there other ways to be hospitable other than opening the front door? Okay. And what other kinds of hospitality are there? Elizabeth Jackson says this. It depends on who they are and how long they're going to stay. Okay. We have no indication in this text that Abram knew who they were or how long they were going to stay. He simply opens up his door, invites the guests in, and tells them, look, I hope you found favor with me so you don't go anywhere else. Please stay with me. Okay? Fascinating. Okay? Now, we talk about other ways of showing hospitality. We can be welcoming, as Ken Carter says, and pleasant. Now, Deacon Anderson does say now if she invited him, she would treat him well. But how many of us know, honestly, on the spirit side? The Bible does have a verse in there about we need to be careful how we treat strangers I believe it's Hebrews 4th chapter. But it tells us that we need to be careful about how we treat strangers because some have entertained angels unaware. Okay? Can you believe that? Some people unknowingly were in the presence of angelic beings and didn't know it. Okay? So let's think about this. Next time we have an occasion to treat someone or greet someone or be kind to someone, we need to be careful because who knows uh, who it is we're actually dealing with. Okay? So Abram doesn't know, but the fact is that he is ready and willing to, treat him with respect. Let me see. Okay, so we got to really be careful with that. Okay, now, so this hospitality is something that is unique to Abram's time. That's how people handle people. That's how people dealt with people. Okay, now let's go on. Okay, now here's the issue. Does showing hospitality require financial resources? Now, how can someone who has little show hospitality to others? Okay. I believe one time we were talking in a particular Bible study, and I believe King Carter talked about taking a bottle of water to one of his neighbors. Okay. That's a way of showing hospitality. I mean, a bottle of water, if you buy them, by the case, it probably costs you 10, 15, 20 cents. Okay. Um, Not a lot of an investment to show hospitality. Okay. You can be kind to people. You can do chores for people. You can volunteer to do things for folks just to show that you're hospitable, that you're a pretty good neighbor. Okay. All right. So what happened is showing hospitality does not require us to be financially able, to be nice to somebody, to treat somebody the way you want to be treated. Sometimes we can show hospitality simply by having what we call the ministry of presence. Somebody's lost a loved one, somebody's been through a tough time. Sometimes you just show up and you're just there. Okay. That's a form of showing hospitality. Be nice to somebody, you know, give somebody a cool glass of water. You know, you don't have to always go into your wallet to be hospitable. Okay. Uh, as Lastrina says, sometimes you can cut their lawn just being nice. Okay. Uh, as Deacon Anderson said, she gave a homeless person on her block clothes. These are things that don't require a lot of us, right? But they show a form of hospitality, of caring. Okay. Now, do you think the Lord appears to individuals these days as he did to Abram, as he did to Abraham? If yes, how? And if you don't believe, why not? Do you think the Lord appears to individuals today as he did to Abram? Okay. So we're talking about, how we can show hospitality. Elizabeth Jackson said, offer them something to drink or to eat. It's a way of showing hospitality, right? Now, I'm going to tell you, this has happened to Brenda and I. I hope it never happens to you, but we have been invited over people's homes and wasn't even offered so much as a glass of water. And the thing that was troubling is these are supposed to be Christians. These are supposed to be decent, God-fearing people, right? They invite you in the house, you sit up there for hours, and they don't even give you a glass of water. I mean, look what Abram did. Abram ran out, begged the people to stay with him, got the wife to make bread and with their best flour, took a calf and killed it and cooked it this meal, brought milk and curds, had somebody come and wash their feet and didn't even know who they were. Okay? So that's really kind of like one of the things that you and I, we probably should be a little bit more hospitable. Okay? So the question is, do you think the Lord appears to individuals these days as he did to Abram? Okay? Now remember, this is a real life physical appearance of three beings. Okay? Uh, I don't know whether you believe in angels, demons, things like that, but these are certainly angelic beings. We know they're angelic because they have a message. They come from God. Abraham suggests that they may be, as far as he knows, messengers from God because he calls one of them the Lord. Okay, so uh, they appear, and in the Old Testament, when we have an appearance of an angel that's called the Lord, we call that a Christophany. Christophany. Okay. Now, a Christophany is a pre-existing appearance of Jesus before Bethlehem, the Son of God appearing as a man before he was born in Bethlehem. So those appearances of Christ in the Old Testament, remember he appeared to Hagar. We're going to see other appearances in the Old Testament before we get through where God appeared to Manoah, Samson's father, as a man. We call those pre-incarnate appearances of Jesus. We call them Christophanies. So we have a Christophany here. Jesus appears, but he doesn't appear by himself. He got two other angels with him. Now, we're going to find out in our next episode what happens because they kind of like split up. Okay? Fascinating stuff. Okay? Now, let's see. Okay. Now, have you ever wondered why the Bible says Abram saw three men, yet when he addressed them, he called them my Lord and not my lords? So we're going to compare and contrast Genesis 18, verse 2 and 3, and also Genesis 9, verse 9, 10, and 13. So as you can see in the text, Abraham is up to something, or he's aware that something is different about these men. Okay? And he calls them Lord. He calls them in the singular. And what some scholars are thinking is that he recognizes one of them to be uniquely the Son of God. We don't know how he knows, but he knows. And notice that they'll have a conversation with Abram. And if you think it was already kind of strange that he would encounter these beings, notice they ate what he put before them. Okay, so they were spiritual, they were divine beings, but they also were in bodily form, like a man. Okay, like a physical human being. So they ate what was put in front of them, but then they had super knowledge. Okay, let's go on. Now, there's a saying that when you entertain strangers, you entertain angels. And that's in the Bible. Okay? Now, how does this saying apply to this passage? Pretty simple. Abram comes to the realization, probably early on, that these beings were actually divine beings. That they just weren't regular, everyday men. Maybe it's because he didn't recognize them as being from around here. Maybe with their clothing. Maybe it was how they looked. We don't know, but somehow Abram recognized that these are indeed angelic beings. Okay? All right. Now, now, just suppose for a moment you're Sarah and you're childless and you're 89 years old. You're 89. On your next birthday, you're going to be 90 years old. Okay? How would you have felt about what you heard? Now, what she heard was one of the visitors saying to Abraham, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" Now, the fact that these are strangers and the fact that they knew who Abram was and they knew who his wife was. Okay? Now, so here we go. Now, verse number 9. Where is your wife? They asked him. Were they asking in unison or not? We don't know. But it says they. Okay? It's three of them. They asked Abram, where is your wife, Sarah? Okay? Now, this is interesting because remember, it was the previous episode where Sarah's name got changed. Okay? So these guys show up and they don't call her Sarai and they don't call Abraham. They don't call Abraham Abram. They call him Abraham and they call her Sarah. And these were names that were given to both of them by the Most High. And so right after that, these guys, three of them come up and say, where is your wife? Okay? And he says, she's over there in the tent. And he says, one of them says to Abram, this time next year, okay, I will surely come and your wife will have a son. She overhears that, and it says in verse number 10, now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him, meaning Abram, okay? Abram and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So verse 12, so Sarah laughed to herself as though, as she thought, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Okay. Then the Lord, listen to this, verse number 13. Then the Lord, okay, let's see if I can find it for you. Verse 13. I want to show you this so you can see it. Then the Lord, and that's a capital L. Okay, so it's not a small L. This is God himself. One of the three said to Abraham, why does Sarah laugh? Now he heard her laugh. And why did she laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I'm old? Okay. Is anything too hard for the Lord? This is what God says. Is there anything too hard for me? I'll return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Okay? So the question is, can you blame Sarah at 89 years old for laughing? Okay? Okay? So how would you describe Sarah's laughter? Is she like, man, get out of my face? No, I can't believe it. Oh, wow. Awesome. Is this a laugh of unbelief? Is this a laugh of like, no way, no way? All right. Now, apparently the laugh is not a laugh of joy. She's not overjoyed, okay? She really is kind of like, nah, I can't see this. And if I'm going to have children, why wait till I'm so old till it don't even make sense for me to have a child? to give me a child. Okay. Now we know it's not a laugh of joy because when the Lord speaks to her, the Bible says straight up she lied and said, "No, I didn't laugh." And the Lord said, "Yes, you did." Okay. Okay. She said, "No way." Uh, that's the kind of laugh. Okay. So she says, "No way." Okay. Deacon Nancy says, "I'm too old to have a child." I mean, you hear people who are not even 89, 79, 69, 59, 49. Some people in their late 30s or 20s. Man, I'm too old to have a child. I'm not ready for this. No way. Oh, man. It's not joy. It's like frustration. It's like, oh, God, I got to deal with this. Maybe that's what Sarah's feeling. Okay. Now, chapter 17, verse 16 and 17, and chapter 18, verse 12 to 13 have something in common. Let's look at it. I'll make it big so you can see it at home. Okay. It says, I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. This is what God said to Abram. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations, kings of people. Okay? Will come from her. Abram fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? So this is like just before these three visitors come, God ratifies his covenant with Abram and tell Abram, you're going to have a son by Sarah. And he falls down laughing and said, man, will a son be born to a man who's 100 years old? And will Sarah have a child at the age of 90? Okay. And then we get to chapter 18, and what we just talked about. So Sarah laughed to herself, and she thought, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I'm old? So let's be honest. The response of both of them was to laugh in the face of God when God promised that they were going to have a child. Abram said, I'm 100, she's 90. Okay. Sarah's like, you know what? I'm 89 now, and I'm just about to be 90, and my husband is 99, just about to turn 100. So we know this was pretty close in proximity, the time period, probably within weeks, if not months, that they both make the same declaration, because they're looking at the natural and they can't see that God really is in control of everything. Okay. So in what ways has God brought laughter into your life? What does God cause you to laugh about? Okay. As Ken Carter said, her laughter was like, are you kidding me? Right? Yeah, for real. Yeah, make my day. Right? So, in what ways has God brought laughter into your life? All right? That's the question. How he brought laughter into your life. I'll give you a minute to put your response up there. Okay? And while you're thinking about that, we're going to move on a little bit, okay? Where in your life do you need to exercise more faith? Now, God had to admonish Sarah because she lacked faith, right? Okay. All right. Deacon Anderson makes a point. She said at her age, she gets tired and worn out just trying to babysit her grandchildren. And you know something about this, and you think about how God has this circle of life. The best way I can put it to you is uh, when a woman has children and a man has children, a couple, they get together, they have children. That God has it so that in their maybe their late teens, 20s, 30s, whatever, they have children. Okay. Then as they begin to progress through that circle of life, okay, they are you know, they get to be 50, somewhere around there, and maybe their children are in their early 20s. Okay. That child gets to be 25, 30, they have their own children. At that time, guess what? The parent may be in their 50s or 60s. And what God does is this. He makes the circle of life like this. At the point where you're getting older, that's the time when God may bless you to have children who have their own children. Okay? Now here's the interesting thing is that God has set the circle of life that when you are younger, you're able to keep up with your toddler. Okay, you're able to keep up with your child who is 5, 6, 7 because you're still in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. Okay, but when you get in your 60s and 70s, you don't want to be trying to track down a toddler. Okay, you're not trying to go around and take care of a newborn baby because your circle of life, the woman's body is changing where she is now going through a process where her body is shutting down those the ability to have children. Okay. So God in his wisdom did not expect you or I to claim the promise of Sarah or Abraham. You get into people who talk about all the promises in the Bible for all the people of God. I'm like, God, I don't want the promise of Abraham. I do not want to have children when I'm 100 years old. And I don't know too many women who want to have their first child at the age of 90 because our bodies have already been through the circle of life. Bodies already been shut down. Can you imagine at 100 years old, you try to keep up with a 2-year-old at 102? Can you imagine at 92 years old, you're trying to watch over a 2-year-old Isaac who's full of energy and energetic? Nah. Okay. Now we talked about earlier, we talked about laughter. Okay. Uh, so let me read this to you. I think this is interesting. We talk about when God brings laughter into your life. Vera Holmes says he brought laughter on last Saturday when I was at my grandson's football game and it was his birthday. And I looked up at what it was a cheerleader with a bullhorn to shout out happy birthday to Lamont Lester, number 56. And I had the crowd singing happy birthday. Sound like only something a grandmother would do. I'm sure he had fun with that. Okay. And as Brother Perry said, when you get in your 60s and 70s, you just don't have the energy that you had when you were in your 20s and 30s to be running around a 2-year-old. Okay. I know the age I am now. I talk to my grandchildren. I tell them, look, come here. Come here, because see, Grandpa ain't gonna run. I'm not gonna run after you. I'm gonna be too tired out. No, you just come here to me, and we can deal with it. Okay. Now, so Sarah looking at it, Abel looking at it. He said, "I'm about to be 100. My wife's about to be 90, and ain't the time for the two of us to be running around trying to keep up with no brand new spanking brand new baby." Okay. All right. Now, what circumstances have you encountered in your life that you doubted God would handle because of what you know? And yet he took care of it to demonstrate that there's nothing too hard for the Lord. Okay? Here. Now, this is what the point I want to make is that sometimes we think that God does not won't take care of the stuff because he does, you know, because of what we know. Some of us we know we're too old. Some of us we know that we got too much baggage. Some of us know that we got too much stuff that's hanging around us, negative forces. But God somehow still intervenes, still steps in the situation and takes care of it, even though he knows what we have and what we bring. And I think God does that to demonstrate to us that there is nothing that is too hard for God. Nothing that is too hard for God. Okay? So I just want you to think about that in this word for today. Abraham and Sarah learned a valuable lesson. And I think of a lesson that you and I need to learn as well is if God promised it, he will bring it to pass. If he said it's going to happen, you and I just need to sit back and enjoy the ride because we may feel like we are worn out. We may feel like we're just totally incapable for this moment. But if God promised you something that you haven't got it yet, you need to hang on because if he said it, it will happen. Okay. And that's the lesson I think Abraham and Sarah learned. Don't laugh at God. Don't take God for granted. Don't think that he can't do it, that his arm is not strong. If he promised it, he will bring it to pass. Okay? So hopefully this word has been helpful to you. I just wanted to point out a couple of things as we get ready to close. If you have a prayer request, please put it in the comment field. We would love to pray for you and with you. I want to say thank you to all of my New Hope family and friends. Thank you for your support of the church. We have had Project Nehemiah, and we're still at it. And we just want to let you know that we appreciate your contributions. Okay. We are getting, we have a program called Empower Build. It's an academy where we're trying to help returning citizens get skills. Now, if you have a family member who's a returning citizen, you can also get this valuable training and learn a skill and become a welder. Welding still pays top dollar, okay? And we are teaching people these skills for nothing, okay? You just come and come to classes and you can learn it, okay? So Deacon Anderson asked prayer for her niece in Mississippi. We're certainly asking all of you who are on with us now if you could remember her niece. We also are back to school, and we have a after-school program that is free where we're teaching our young people how to become the next doctors, lawyers, engineers, architects, designers. And then we got them in the lab, and we're forming them right now. So if you have a young person after school program, you can just scan the QR code and get the information and make sure that your family member, we're looking to work with kids from third grade to sixth grade. Just go to etcjc.org/code. Okay, there's one great program. All right. And let me see. Also, we want to thank all of you who have been supporting our project. We call it our refrigerator, community refrigerator, and also our program where we feed the food pantry. Thank you for your support. Now we're getting ready to go to God in prayer, and we're going to ask you if you would just reflect with us for a few minutes as we pray, and especially if we remember Deacon Shirley Anderson's niece in Mississippi. Lord, thank you for this time that we've had to share together. We want, first of all, be mindful to lift up Deacon Anderson's niece. We don't know the situation, but we know, just like you knew the situation with Abraham and Sarah, you know exactly what needs to be done. So we're asking you to intercede, to step in, to do like only you can. We pray not only for her niece, but we pray for those who may be sick, those who may be going through great difficulty. But God, we also want to pause and say thank you to everybody who spent part of their lunch hour with us today, uh, looking at this word for today. Thank you for your promise that whatever you said you will do, you will do. Go with us and stand by us and keep us is our prayer. Bless our nation, bless our leaders, bless our communities everywhere. Bless our families is our prayer. We ask it in the strong name of Christ. Amen. We'll leave you with this idea. Go with God and be a blessing. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know your labor is not in vain in the Lord. May God bless you. May heaven smile upon you. And may God grant you his peace.